This man helped an FBI agent solve a case worth hundreds of millions of dollars simply by seeing the thread on his shoulder. His name is Neal, an international art thief. 4 years ago, he was arrested and imprisoned by FBI agent Peter, but due to insufficient evidence, Neal was only sentenced to 4 years in prison. He wanted to serve his sentence honestly, but when there was only half a month left in his sentence, Neal chose to escape from prison. Neal first shaved his beard, then took out the prison guard's uniform from the toilet tank. After some tidying up, he walked out of the bathroom. Neal first walked confidently through the prison's workroom and stole the prison guard's access card on the way. In this way, Neal walked out of the prison in a swagger. Because he had no means of transportation, he stole the prison's pickup truck and came to a small stall next to the airport. After choosing a waiter's coat, he waved to the rich man who was parking his car. The rich man looked at Neal's coat and naturally thought that he was the parking staff, so he gave him the car keys and a tip. In this way, Neal successfully turned from a prisoner into a rich man driving a luxury car. At the same time, the news of Neal's escape was also discovered by the prison. The FBI immediately found Peter and told him about Neal's escape. Peter hurried to the prison, and the FBI commander was already waiting for him. It turns out that it was Peter who arrested Neal a few years ago, and now the FBI has to give him the task of hunting down Neal again. Peter really can't understand why Neal chose to escape from prison when his sentence was about to end. Peter retrieved the list of people who had visited Neal recently. He found that Neal's girlfriend used to visit him in prison every week, but she hadn't come in the past 2 weeks. Peter immediately guessed that Neal must have chosen to escape from prison in order to keep his girlfriend. Peter immediately went to Neal's girlfriend's house, and sure enough, he was there. However, Neal's girlfriend had obviously moved out at this time. She only left an empty red wine bottle for Neal. Peter felt that Neal's behavior was not worth it, but Neal didn't care at this time. Just as Neal was about to be arrested for the second time, he accidentally discovered the metal wire on Peter's shoulder.
You know what this is?
Don't know.
What's it worth if I tell you what this is?
What are you talking
If
about?
I tell you what this is right now, will you agree to meet me back in prison in 1 week?
Okay.
It's a security fiber for the new Canadian $100 bill.
Neal's statement was soon confirmed, which made Peter very happy. He went to the prison to visit Neal that day, hoping to get more useful information from him. But Neal put forward his own conditions. He hoped that Peter would get him an FBI special consultant status and bail him out of prison, but Peter refused. He'd spent 5 years catching Neal, and he knew too well how cunning Neal was. Peter returned home and told his wife everything. He thought that a smart man like Neal would never escape from prison for a woman. He must have other plans.
If you were Neal, you wouldn't have run for me.
The next day, Peter bailed Neal out and put electronic anklets on him, but Neal wanted to become a special consultant for the FBI and had to help Peter catch the Dutchman. Soon, Peter and Neal arrived at the customs at the airport, where they seized a batch of fairy tales smuggled in by the Dutch. Peter was very confused as to why the Dutch went to so much trouble to smuggle so many fairy tales. But Neal discovered the problem through the production year of the books. These books were all produced in 1944, and the packaging used at that time was made of a very special paper. No one produces this kind of paper anymore. Obviously, the Dutch people's purpose was not the books, but to obtain this special paper. Neal, a famous art thief, immediately thought of what could be made with this paper, which was the bond kept in the museum. This is a bond issued by the United States to Spain in 1944. However, because it is a long-term bond, it can still be used even now. It is rumored that most of these bonds are in the hands of some mysterious collectors because of their collection value, and the one in the museum is the last known bond.
Except it's a forgery.
The curator naturally didn't believe what Neal said, but the smell of undried ink on the bond forced him to believe it. Peter and Neal, who returned to the FBI headquarters, also learned that more than 60 fairy tale books had been signed for, and if these papers were printed into bonds, they would be worth more than $1 billion. But Peter was very confused as to why the Dutch stole the real bonds and kept the fake ones. Neal immediately thought that if the Dutch wanted to exchange the bonds, the only bond they could use for comparison would be the bond in the museum. However, the bond in the museum was produced together with the fake one, and there was no difference at all. The Dutch could use a large number of fake bonds to exchange for a large amount of US dollars. Peter got up in the morning and received a call from the police station. They found that there was a problem with Neal's electronic handcuffs. Peter immediately prepared to look for Neal.
Caffrey is with me.
Neal told Peter that he already knew the Dutchman's true identity. The greatest sorrow of all counterfeit criminals is that they cannot sign their works, but they will still leave their own traces in the counterfeit works. Neal discovered that the fake bond had CH printed on it, which was the mark of Curtis Hagen in the counterfeiting industry. Hagen happened to have a printing factory in the city, and it was very likely that he printed the fake bonds there. Peter and Neal immediately came to the address of the printing factory. There were thugs in front and behind, and the sound of printing machines came from the factory. It was obvious that this was where Hagen printed fake bonds. Neal asked Peter to call for support immediately, but after Peter answered the phone, he took Neal away. Peter returned to the FBI headquarters and told Neal that without solid evidence, they had no way to just go in and search. Then Peter gave Neal a very thick search regulations. After Neal returned home, he immediately began to look through the search regulations. Suddenly, Neal looked at the electronic anklets on his feet. Then he got up and took the landlord's car keys. Sure enough, not long after, the FBI agent told Peter that Neal had escaped the 2-mile restriction. At this time, Neal drove to the door of the printing factory. After getting out of the car, Neal immediately started taking pictures. The thugs from the printing factory immediately surrounded him. They not only snatched Neal's camera, but also took him directly into the printing factory. Neal was locked up in an office in the factory by the thugs, but Neal locked the door while the thugs were not paying attention. At this time, Hagen also came over. He immediately recognized Neal and threatened him with a gun to open the door, but Neal showed the electronic anklet on his ankle. The siren sounded outside. As the FBI broke in, everyone at the scene was controlled. Seeing that Peter had arrived, Neal immediately opened the door. He also took advantage of the FBI's break-in to pry open Hagen's safe and found the real bond. The next morning, Peter found Neal. Due to Neal's outstanding performance in the case, the FBI superiors also awarded Neal the status of FBI special consultant as agreed.